My name is Paul. I'm the moderator for this session. Just a bit about me. My drivers is about financial digital inclusion. And while that is not directly related to that, it's some of the levers towards that. If we're not financially included, then that creates challenges around land ownership. And when we get to rural land, doing financial inclusion is quite difficult because the banks are far. So that's actually what drives me. I'd like to welcome everybody to this Fest Media public dialogue on This Land is My Land, Motions and Emotions Around Land Reform in Namibia. I think most of you have a book. If you don't have a book, I think the books are at the bookstore that is behind me. I'd like to also recognize our host, Fest Media, and in particular, Friedrich, who is the Fest resident director to my left, and the Fest team that worked very hard for quite a long time to bring this event together. It's been challenged by different stages of COVID. We did have a virtual session, but virtual is not the same as having a physical session. I'd like to recognize our esteemed speakers. We have Erica von Leeshow. I apologize, mispronounced it, and Heroic Tempers. I'd also like to recognize our partners, the particular delegation from the Namibian National Association of the Deaf, our invited guests, and the members of the media who are here to record this for Mr. Spirit. And I apologize if I didn't mention anybody. I'm not excluding anyone. Everyone is welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols. I don't know if we have any members of Parliament. All protocols observed. We have a very exciting program. And as I mentioned, we are doing it in the physical format, which I've actually explained. So I'll explain a little bit more about visual when we actually get to the more interactive session. But we're going to start with the program. And at the beginning of the program, we have an introduction to the book by the book's author. And following that, we'll have a discussion perspective on the book and then the open discussion. Just for housekeeping, we still live in a state of COVID. So if everyone can observe the COVID protocols, the social distancing and the wearing of masks. Of course, it's difficult to talk with masks. So it's free to take off the mask when you choose to talk. For those that need to use the toilets, I think the toilets are over there. If you have cell phones, it's possible to put them on silent, please do. And just remember, this is not a punitive process. We're here to have fun, we're here to engage, we're here to listen, and we're here to learn, and also share our views and our thoughts. So on that note, I'm going to hand the floor over to Freya, the country director, for some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me once get up to address you all very briefly. Dear Erika, Niederland, dear Uhuru, members, civil society activists, dear members of the Association of the Deaf Society, dear ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Stiftung, it's my pleasure, it's my honor to welcome you all to tonight. Let me quickly show you the book. I'm sure you all have it in your hand already. Maybe a few of you already had a chance to have a look in it. Inside. If you haven't, you might have asked yourself, it's a funny title. This land is my land? Okay. But now, motion and emotion around land reform in Namibia. This is quite different, let me put it that way. To talk, to tackle emotion when it comes to a highly sensitive topic in the Namibian society as land reform is. And now I sit down again to follow the protocol, but I continue continue my remarks. So It is a highly contested topic, and still it is very, maybe because of that, it is not possible to discuss land reform without tackling emotions. I'm quite convinced that this is the case, because if we are to spare that out, then we forget about how deeply entrenched these emotions are due to the historical experiences, mostly during times of colonialism and apartheid. So to discuss land, we have to talk about emotions. How do we do that? I think this is a very outstanding feature of Erika's book, and I really would like to commend her to do that. He kind of tackled the bull by the horns by actually listening to people. You went to those who know, the experts on the ground, those who live on the land, the farmers of all various backgrounds, be it German farmers, be it small-scale farmers, be it farm workers. They are all very, very close to the land issue. And what did you do? You sat down with them and listened. Without judging in the very first place, just listening. And if we manage to do that today, to actually, as you already said and indicated, Paul, sit down and listen to each other and try and collect different perspectives and views, then I think we have hit the objective of tonight. That will be great. It is a bit challenging, we all know that, because of emotions attached. But I think as long as we stick to the rules of tolerance and respect, we will be fine. Certainly, no hate speech will be tolerated, but I think this is very obvious and everyone will understand. A few words again, also in addition to the setup, which is unusual, we are aware of that, but again, I also would like to encourage you, it's really fun to take part in this discussion, but also don't worry if you would like to keep seated, that is also fine, but it will be great to really get as many perspectives as possible tonight. Obviously, we cannot stop there, we need to continue the debate, and we've got that in mind. Maybe what you can do is collect a couple of highly critical notions, questions, issues that we could tackle next time in a more focused debate, with a more narrowed focus. But for today, our focus is very broad, and we are here to listen. So thank you very much again for taking time to come and attend. I would also like to thank the FES Namibia team, and in fact today we are quite a big team for having made this possible. I would like to thank obviously Erika and Urugu for being here to share your views with us. Thanks to Paul, you've come all the way from Swakopmund to guide us through this fishbowl. So thanks, it's very, great. And obviously thanks to all of you who are willing to share your views. With these views remarks, I wish all of us a very vibrant and hopefully constructive debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fred. So now we're going to move over to the introduction of the book by the book's author, Erika. I don't have the microphone over.
Thank you, Paul. I also stand up to greet you all. Good evening. Thank you for coming and sharing our discussion tonight. Also, thank you, Friedrich, for organizing this event to talk about the book. Thank you for joining us on the panel. Thank you, Paul. Thank you also, Wolfgang Werner, he's here because he, not only because, a new edition of the book he wrote part of the updated information because he's a real expert on land questions. Yes, thank you for coming and welcome, and I sit down now. The first question, Raya has actually answered it already, is why did I write that book? Yes, because land is, was, and will be an extremely emotional and sensitive issue. And this came more into the public discussion after independence, when the new Namibian government was planning to institute land reform instruments to change the unjust land distribution in the country because of land dispossession in the past. It was, what is interesting is that land, especially with respect to its economic importance, is such an issue, much more than the economic sector, the other economic sector. White business and independence was financially so much more powerful than the white landowners, the financial power of the landowners. But that was never as heatedly discussed as the land question and the land distribution. The book actually has two parts, or actually three. One part is informative. It's all about the history of land reform, about the instruments of land reform that were introduced in 1991. It's about the two land conferences, and it's about also statistics, how much land has been distributed since 1991 up to today, how much percentage has been attributed to resettlement farms and how much to affirmative action farms. All that is explained in one part of the book. The main part actually is what Freya said already. I decided to leave the academic publications, take my car and drive around the country. I drove altogether 5,000 kilometers from north to south, from east to west, and I interviewed formally more or less 50 people, but many, many more on my way. Wherever I went, we talked to shop owners, we talked to at the service station, to the attendants, we talked to people on the street who showed us the way. Everybody we asked about land reform and what they had to say quite spontaneously as well. And I think this started in 2008 and 2007, 2008, and then the new edition now in 2020-21, and the land reform hasn't lost any importance and any emotionality. Even, I think the land question has even become more emotional with time, and especially today after the second land conference in 2018, we all realized that new topics about land reform came to the fore, like especially ancestral land and also urban land. When I started my journey, I actually had 2 or 3 main questions in mind. The first question was, why is land reform such an emotional issue? Is it in the same way emotional for the different groups of people, for black and white, for the different population groups, for old and young? That was the first question, why is it so emotional? And the second question, which was even more interesting, is why do people really want land? Because we know at the Ministry of Lands and Resettlement, there are more than 200,000 applications for resettlement and many more for affirmative action loans to buy a piece of land. So, but why do people want land? Is it the same reason for the different groups? Are there very different reasons? Yes. And I really noticed and I realized the reasons are very different indeed. The obvious answer would be, why do you want land? The obvious answer would be, I want to farm. I want to be a farmer. I want to be agriculturally productive. I want to make a living. But is that really the only reason? Now, in short, you can read it all in the book, but why is land so emotional for the different people? If I start with the white farmers, I interviewed also some German-speaking farmers in different areas. And of course, why is it emotional for white farmers? Yes, one reason, the fear of expropriation. They have farms, sometimes the farms have been in their position for 3 or 4 generations, and expropriation would be a very hurtful experience. And also it means that they are economically insecure in terms of investment and so on. Second fear that was expressed, that conditions could develop like in Zimbabwe, where I think more than 4,000 white farmers were chased from the land, and sadly the economy of the land, of the country, deteriorated. Also, farming for the white farmers were not as many non-farmers would expect, financially usually not so very rewarding. There are some very rich farmers who have huge farms and huge houses and earn a lot of money, but the majority of farmers work very hard. They have a very insecure future because of droughts and of course also because of the political situation. And most farmers don't encourage their children to take over the farm one day because they know it will be a very hard life, and they rather try to give them a good education so that they have other options. I also talked to farm workers. Now, farm workers are the biggest losers actually up to now with land reform, because on a farm, they have no safe home, they live under unsecure conditions, and if farms are sold, farm workers have no right in terms of staying on the farm or getting a share in the same. And that's the same for when a white farmer sells his farm, or when a black farmer sells his farm, or when the government buys land for settlement purposes. Farm workers don't have any rights. Now, if you ask, when I asked blacks, Namibians, why is land such an emotional issue, a very expected answer was because of land dispossession in the past. Land was dispossessed, especially from the Nama and Herero people during colonialism. It was again dispossessed during apartheid. And can talk about that later. Some Nama and Herero say dispossessed again now. Also, what many people said, land was what our liberation struggle was about. We fought for Namibia's independence, and that meant we fought for land. Land was almost the symbol for much more than independence and freedom. Land was the symbol of the liberation struggle. And also, almost all people said, land for us means livelihood, which is in quite a contrast to what white farmers say. They said, our parents, it's of vital importance. Land is very emotional for them. We also feel their emotions. We also feel their pain of dispossession, of loss of land, of loss of the land traditions. But we ourselves, we are actually more interested in life in the cities, in a life where we have a salaried work, and for us, independence means more freedom, democracy, human rights, and not so much a matter of land. One can also say that during the past years, during the 30 years that land reform has happened in the form of resettlement programs and affirmative action programs, a new emotion has surfaced. Not so much the pain about land dispossession, but also an emotion of disappointment. It was actually very sad to hear that especially people of some of those ethnic groups that were dispossessed by, during colonialism, that their land, in terms of the land reform principles, was not in the majority returned to them, but to all Namibians, and they were just a very small part of it. There were also the disappointment that there was not enough government support for the resettlement farmers and the affirmative action farmers. And they struggled, and there were many unfulfilled promises. The second land conference has also made it very clear that the shift or the emphasis on land and emotions around land have changed or have strengthened, because it was very clear at that conference that the question of ancestral land, which was not addressed at the first land conference, or it was actually agreed not to address it, came up as one of the main topics. And the second main topic was urban land. And a commission of inquiry into ancestral land and restitution was set up. We were part of that commission to really investigate questions of ancestral land. And there is also a summary in the book about that, of the commission, of the report of the Commission of Inquiry. And what was interesting was that the Commission listened to testimonies of more than 1,700 people who told their stories about loss of land and about ancestral land claims and so on. And it also became clear during these investigations, and that's what the Commission also reported on, that it is very difficult to define and identify ancestral land. Now, why do people want land? There were many reasons, of course. Everybody said something else. Most of them said in the first place they want to be farmers. Others said we would like our ancestral land back because our ancestral land is part of our identity, it's part of our culture, and it was dispossessed illegally from us, and it's never been returned. But what came out, what was very interesting that came out, that more than anything else, for most people whom I asked who would really want to have land, they want to have land because having land means having a home, a safe home, a home where nobody, a home for the family, a true homeland, not a South African kind of homeland, but a home on a land which is yours, without forced removal, without dispossessions. And I actually want to read you a very small part in the book about a woman whom I interviewed, where this came out very clearly. She says, I really wish the government would give us a very small piece of land which we can buy cheaply. so that we do not have to go to Windhoek where it is full and where there are a lot of problems, where the water is expensive and where we have no place to stay. Then I know this is my place, and we can build a small house and have some chickens. A place where we all can live together when I'm finished with work, when I'm 65. We do not have to get a whole farm, only a small piece. So this is actually what came out also at the second land conference, that so many people who apply for resettlement would have been so much happier to get a small plot, sometimes somewhere outside the town or village, which they can buy for little money, where they can set up a house which is their own, and where they can live with their family. And I also interviewed Beaka Chimune. I think he's not here, but he was also very engaged in land reform initiatives. And he says, and this summarizes actually what also came out after the second land conference. We never asked, what for do you need land? Needing land for what purpose? The government always assumed people want to farm to have land. But he says, I see this, not asking the question, as a missed opportunity. Because instead of buying millions of hectares of agricultural land, we could have invested in urban land, including the provision of some services. How many families could have been resettled by this time on urban land? So the real emotions have shifted towards urban land, and a lot of people are now protesting in urban areas. This, in a way, lowers temperature on farming land and allows time for better planning and implementation. So hopefully we can also discuss this question of urban land versus farmland. And I just touched on a very few points in the book. There's much more to it. So read it yourself. Maybe some of you have read it already. If you ask questions, if you have questions, please ask me and ask Umu and talk with each other. And let's have a good discussion. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Erica. Very interesting. And as Erica mentioned, we all have the book. So let's all read the book and interact around the book. So we're moving on to the next section of our program. And this is discussing on the perspectives of This Land is My Land, Emotions and Emotions around land reform in Namibia by Hero Dappers. So I'm just going to hand the floor over to Hero.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the director of ceremonies. I'm a bit down emotionally, and I want to, not because of land reform, but yesterday I lost a dear brother. Ignatius Kotongo Chipamene is actually my namesake. My other name is also Ignatius. I'm a bit emotional because he's really the one that has trained me in the kind of work around social justice that I'm doing nowadays. Part of this training took place in the CA's political prison in 1988, where we spent a month together in the same cell. Most of the discussions, almost 20 hours a day, was political education and conscientization. So I want to take a moment and just salute him for what he meant for me personally, for this country, and for humanity, and may his soul indeed rest in peace. I want to thank our long-standing partner and all-weather partner, FES, for the kind invitation. Many donor partners that we had have left, but FES is one of the few partners that remains and supports the work that we do around social justice. I almost declined the invitation because land issues makes me very emotional. But then I read the subtitle of the book, Motions and Emotions, and I said, okay, let me go there and be emotional, because that's what the author is wanting us to do. And I really want to commend Erica for a wonderful book, for an emotionally charged book. I've read it twice, maybe a month ago and again last night, and there were highs and lows. There were times that I was saying like, how could he? And then other times I would say, yes, tell them. And so please read the book, and it's really a very, very lively book. I also want to thank you in particular for changing your format from doing just the questionnaires and taking time to travel and meet people and interact and to also observe the silent answers that people normally don't give, that you get from body language and so on. I know it was a lot of risk, a lot of effort, sacrifice, but I think it was really worth it, the kind of work that came out from there. I want to organize my thoughts in around three points. One, just some general comments on the work of the author and the approaches. Then secondly, I want to mention from my experience from the work in this area, some issues that fuels the emotions around land reform, and then I want to conclude with some thoughts for the way forward about how we can build consensus and try to cool down temperatures and create some consensus around this emotionally charged topic. The first one around the work of the author, and as I said, I really want to commend you. I'm not surprised by the kind of work that you have done. We have previously worked together on the genocide issue within the churches, trying to bring a conversation around, especially in the Lutheran churches, of different speakers, and it has been quite useful. It's important to monitor the emotions in society, I think, so that we can assess and if there is need, take some appropriate actions. I was really recently moved by how sometimes Namibians that are supposed to be quiet and silent and apparently peaceful were charged by things like I remember when the 3 young guys were killed by the Botswana Defense Force. Just a few days, people organized and there were demonstrations and social media and so on, and it caused a lot of stir. There was the young women and girls around Egesmoek, around the GBV campaign and so on, and this, especially around the reconciliation agreement, when it was released, it stirred a lot of emotions and debates and discussions and so on. So therefore, I think because we are in the age of social media and so on, revolutions can be organized without people meeting in halls, community halls and so on. So therefore, it's good to the landowners, so that you as Namibians can really sit down around the table and discuss these issues. And you have mentioned the initiatives that are ongoing around the German-speaking Namibians Forum and other people that are willing to enter into this kind of dialogue. So I think your book also provides that kind of information. I want to I think you have already admitted that it's difficult to, in a subject like this, be absolutely like not non-biased and neutral, and you have admitted that no one can actually claim to be objective and neutral in a discussion like this. There are in areas that I thought that you could have digged in a bit more. The thoughts and thinking of the Afrikaner community in Namibia, what we used to call the bush. That voice is really is absent. We really don't know what they think about the land question, what they are willing, what their thoughts are about their history, how they came here, and so on. There's been a lot of writing from the German speakers and so on, but the Afrikaner has been very, very quiet, and it would be interesting to hear what their thoughts are and so on. So if you are thinking of a third edition, please make a turn at a few of their places, and maybe also other foreigners, Italians, the Russians, Mexicans, and so on, just to see without a history like the one we have with Germany, what would come out there. Erika, I was a bit surprised by your avoidance to refer to genocide as often as you referred a lot to the 1905, 1908 colonial war, and I was just curious to know why you avoided to use the concept genocide, because that war is mostly been referred to as the genocide war, and I was just curious. I don't know whether you were in the conversation we had with a delegation from Germany, mainly of churches, where Bishop Nambala from the Helsinki Church spoke for about 30 minutes about Namibia's struggle, colonial history, and so on. And in those whole 30 minutes, for once, he did not mention the word genocide. And I was just, after he spoke, I said, I was surprised that you didn't mention this thing, but it's something that just, sometimes people see that as sort of denying that there was genocide. I'm sure you are not in that boat because of the work that we have done previously and so on. Yeah, but I think more of our university professors and so on, political commentators, other journalists needs to do more of this kind of work. I want to come to the second part of my intervention and just my thoughts around why and what is fueling the emotions around the land issue. I think, and there's this thing comes up a lot in the book, the perception of peace and stability. I agree that we don't have war in Namibia, but whether we have peace, I'm not sure. When people go to bed on an empty stomach, I don't know whether you call that peace. When people have no hope, when they are jobless for years, when there is so much destitution, hopelessness, then I'm saying, who enjoys this peace that we have? And is it really a genuine peace? And when 50%, the UN says 50% of Namibians are facing multidimensional poverty, and I'm saying, is that really peace? How long is this stability going to be? And people try to find explanations about their poverty, and they say it's because our ancestors lost land that we are poor today. It's because the mines are owned by foreigners, and we don't get what we are supposed to get. So this notion of peace and stability, I think, is a problematic one. So many Black Namibians are asking, the Blacks did not insist on ancestral land, they did not claim, they did not chase anyone, but then they ask him, what did the white Namibians bring to the table? What are they willing to sacrifice? What did they sacrifice for this reconciliation to happen? For us, from where I'm sitting, we only see prosperity, rich wealth, and all that within the white community, and the complete opposite for the majority of Blacks. Lucky are the few Blacks that have become millionaires, that are buying properties all over, some of them with state resources that they've illegally acquired. So I'm just saying we need to this give and take. So what did our compatriots and I'm not just talking about the land reform sector or the agricultural sector, but across the board, what did they give for this? I think we must also be mindful that our independence, and there's a lot of emphasis also when you listen to some of the commercial farmers around, the policies that we have are the right ones, they are the correct ones, the government must push those ones and so on. But like some of the policies we have, it's not really by choice. Some of these things were enforced on us. The 1982 principles that SWAPO was asked to accept, otherwise independence was going to be delayed, the resolution 435 was not going to be implemented. And these 1982 principles, we see it largely as protecting white interest in Namibia, European interest at all costs, and it even went to the extent of entrenching those clauses in the constitution that if you touch those ones, you in fact have to touch the whole constitution. You have to maybe suspend the constitution and write a new constitution. In Zimbabwe, at least they had an expiry for what they were forced to sign. In Namibia, there is no expiry; it's forever. We also know that the negotiations that were there between President Mandela and the apartheid government was in prison, where the property clause was compromised, and South Africans are still struggling today to address the land question because of the property clause and all those kind of things. So it's not out of political will and so on that some of these policies were adopted. Many Namibians also feel that the guns maybe have went silent, the active torture and so on of controller is no more happening, but what they go through on a daily basis feels like there is genocide still going on. I go to a place like Bohas in the south and I look at the faces of those people. Even a farm named after their late chief, Simon Cooper Farm, government is unable to expropriate that farm and give it to them, at least in recognition of the heroic struggle that he has led, although he has fled to Botswana and his grave is still there till today. You look at a farm like Hamakari that is mentioned in the book. There's one family against the whole of a Herero community. Why is government not engaging that community, that family, one family, and saying this place has so much historical value and it's a sacred place for this community? Why don't we buy this farm from you? We will pay you compensation for this, so that this community can freely come and do their rituals and so on, without every time has to go through, sorry for that word, a white man to get rights to go and practice their culture. So the interest of one family versus a community. A place like Dortapes, the one craft family's interest is protected by government on the expense of close to 2,000 people that lives there under very inhumane conditions. So I'm saying, so that people can see that yes, there is this give and take. Another thing that is quite painful for and that raises a lot of emotions is that the lack of productivity is equated to being black. It's almost when you hear the commercial farmers commenting, oh, this resettlement program is useless, oh, these people don't know what they don't know how to, and then you say the poor whites that were brought from South Africa here, if they were just given land, like the Namibians in the resettlement program were given. If they're just given land and say, okay, here's your land, without any support, would they have become the successful farmers they are today? No. The German farmers that came from Germany, would they have been successful without the kind of support from their government? They are successful because they got the support from their government. And we have been left on our own. The schemes with AgriBank and so on are just now 5 and 10 years old. When my sister and others were lucky to be resettled, there was no post-resettlement support. People were on their own. So yes, there will be failures, they will struggle. But also, there are successful communal farmers in communal areas. Some of them even more productive than white commercial farmers. The resettlement program was supposed to target those ones. They are known. Their livestock numbers are with meat board and so on. They are known. Target those ones, get them out of the communal areas, and create economic units, upgrade communal areas so that the small-scale farmers can make a start there. And the ones that are the strong ones that have been put on the resettlement program, you have a transitional program for them so that they can next go to AgriBank and get a loan and get a loan. I'm sure my time is running out. There are other things that I would want to mention, but just finally, the failure of our government, the kind of misplaced land reform policies and programs that they are implementing cannot be blamed on the poor farmers that are trying to make a living. We have time and again advised the ministry, and it's probably the most arrogant ministry in this country. They ignore the emotions. They just completely, for them it's a technical thing, for them it's checklist, for them it's like, and then there's corruption. I mean, Professor Vena was there when we were discussing whether to release the resettlement list or not. General Namolo and others were saying this will cause chaos in the country. The permanent secretary then in the ministry was saying it will cause civil war if we release that list. And you were wondering why? Why? You say you have a transparent program, you say people have been resettled justly and so on. So why are you afraid to release the resettlement list? And until today, we don't have a reliable, trustworthy resettlement list that you can rely on, and therefore we have asked for a audit of the resettlement program. I want to conclude on a positive note and just give some ideas in terms of how we can move forward. I think what landless Namibians are asking for is at least just to do the bare minimum of the consensus that have been reached between different stakeholders. We had a national land conference, first one in 91. 24 resolutions were adopted. 26 years after that, when we met at Safari on 1st October 2018, we realized that a very few of these resolutions were implemented by government. For example, we said at the first land conference, expropriate farms of absentee landlords. The minister still came and reported so many absentee landlords are there. We said foreigners must not own land. Just 2 weeks before the land conference, the Minister of Lands entered into a shaky deal with the Russians, even struggling to explain to us what the deal is about. They bought the land, then they leased to government, then it's all those kind of things. So we are saying the bare minimum we have compromised at the second land conference. At least implement those resolutions so that we can make progress. For example, there was talks about expropriation. The Ministry of Lands, after the 2008 judgment on the Kessler case that recommended for the setting up of an expropriation committee, for example, And 3 years after the second land conference, the ministry is still struggling to set up an expropriation committee. Just a committee to deal with expropriation. That's how insensitive sometimes the leadership in the ministry is. So we are saying, please implement at least the consensus we are reaching at the land conference and the compromise resolutions of the Presidential Commission. Let's reach consensus. I was glad to hear that the commercial farmers have come up with some kind of a criteria for expropriation and how it could be done. Last week, or was it early this week, civil society also presented some proposals around criteria for expropriation and how compensation can be calculated and so on. So let's sit around the table and look at these proposals and reach some consensus. Unutilized and underutilized farms should be prioritized. I personally don't have a challenge with productive commercial farmers that are producing at full scale, that are employing and treating their workers well and are taking care of the environment and all those kind of things. Those ones must be supported and encouraged. We must just see maybe how the farm workers can be empowered. We can work with them. So we need to look at land that is unutilized and underutilized. Another idea are great informal settlements. This is the low-hanging fruit. Even the high-level panel on the economy said, first-time homeowners, poor households, give them plots for free for housing. This was probably the only recommendation from that panel that was not accepted, because it was pro-poor. It's about poor people. It's not about the elite. So if people have at least a home in the urban areas, the tensions will cool down. People will feel they own a piece of Namibia in which we can call home. Let's look at innovative ways of empowerment, especially empowering farm workers. There are schemes in other places like South Africa, Western Cape, where farm workers also buy into shares within the agribusiness that they are participating in. So they are not just workers, but they are also co-owners. And the monies we are spending on buying this inflated price on farms, some of that money we can use to help farm workers to buy into the interest shares into the agribusinesses where they are working. Upgrade communal lands, there's great potential. I'm a product and a beneficiary of communal land. Me and Erica always have debate about this issue, whether you can survive from land and so on. And I say, when I look at my classmates, some of them that did not make it where some of us are now, I can see that most of them did not have additional support like farming. I'm sitting here because my grandmother had some farming business. We would load a few goats and go and sell before the school reopens, pay the school fee, and do all other things. And then combine other socio-economic empowerment programs around poverty eradication. I tell you, if we had a basic income grant implemented in this country, the emotions around land would have been cooler, because you are then addressing the extreme levels of poverty, and people feel human and they are taking care of their basic needs. And Namibia can afford a basic income grant. And finally, let's start a dialogue as soon as possible. As you concluded in the book, the emotions are running high, and it's time that we as Namibians, I'm sure we can do it. Thank you very much.
And this is where the floor now becomes yours to interact, share your thoughts, questions. If you have a question, if you could please state your name first, and if the question is directed to one of our speakers, please let us know who you're directing our speaker to. As we mentioned, we have an empty chair here, so we would like discussion to move into the inner circle, but we are open to taking the questions from the outer circle. If you all look around, you'll find Sylvia. Sylvia, can you put your hand up? Sylvia's walking around with a microphone. So just put your hand up if you want to ask a question. If you want to come into the inner circle, feel free to take this chair and have your intervention.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Ebert. I'm a consultant. I invited myself to this platform, and I saw it very beneficial to me. And first and foremost, I want to thank the FES organization for organizing this quite informative dialogue. Erica, if I was a pastor, official and well-registered pastor, I would have blessed you, but I wish you the best in terms of your wisdom. This is a quite very informative and educative book. I'm a Namibian. People are not happy when it comes to land reform in Namibia. If you look around, people only knew that we've got laws and policies around this country when it comes to land issues. We came to discuss, even though our speakers or our panelists also encourage us. I just want to raise a few things here. I recall well and I quote well. I was listening very attentively to Erica. She said that she made interviews with different people, students, and others. But none of her speech or a word mentioned a person with disability. Are we not existing? Don't we deserve land? Are we not Namibian enough? If you were, I was just checking here on the number of the interviewed people. How many persons with disabilities with the land that you have interviewed? This one is a side of it. That in Namibia, a person with disability is not existing at all. If we were existing, then today we will be presented here. You were supposed to include my sister. I don't want to judge you on that. But for future use tomorrow, please, we are existing. Second, I'm very, very disappointed. I was expecting to see political leaders, members of parliament, to feel and to understand our emotions, to judge our emotions here. I'm a Namibian. Am I just a Namibian because of the documents that we are getting from Home Affairs? What qualifies me to be a Namibian? I'm in a small portion of land, in my motherland, in my ancestral land, and I'm called that illegal. So my people, when are we going to be understood? Finally, on disabilities. Till when are we getting cramps? We are tired of cramps. How many people owning land and houses, people with disabilities, in a rural area or in the urban areas? How many people, seriously, there are families that are depending on us just from that social grants. How much more if you give me a portion of land? How many lives am I going to change? I don't want to go deeper on that. But I'm very, very, I think this, Jesus must come soon.
And I was so happy I was given this book. So I had ample time being browsed.
to unpack emotions as an anthropologist myself is very difficult. I am very grateful tonight for the start of this platform, the inclusive committee. It's a start. It's something. It's not nothing. I also would like to say, when you embark on doing a project, it is very difficult to include everyone. But that is why we are here tonight to look at this book. And I know this is not the end. This is the start of maybe, as he said, as a follow-up on this. And I would really like to congratulate you. You have driven so many kilometers. It's in this vast country geographically. And congratulations on that. I have a few remarks and I have a question. When I started to, I'm an academic, so I started at the back of a book. And then I moved to the front. And when I saw black and white, I was very curious to know why are these two terminologies in your book. As a Namibian, I'm also a Namibian, and I went on page 30. I got the answer. You explaining it. However, I was very, very, very impressed with the word emotions. When it comes to emotions, and especially the land issue, these two terminologies is very problematic for me. And I would like to ask you, I know you have given an explanation on page 30, but I would like to know from you, because I feel as a researcher, what you go into the field with, the terminology, the notion, it drags through your whole journey. And when, as a Namibian independent, I know we have huge issues in this country. It came out in 5-10 minutes here tonight. And we can't solve everything tonight. But I would like specifically you, as the author and the people in this book, to answer and give more light on page 30 for me. And why these terminologies? Because I feel in this emotional issue of land, are we not saying we must come together as a unity, as a united Namibia? If we see what happened in Zimbabwe, if we see what is happening in South Africa, that unity and these two words, I feel, can you just unpack it more, please? Thank you very much.
My name is Beata Ahmad. I am the chairman of the Deaf Association. I'm really happy to be invited and to be here. And I actually want to congratulate or thank the FES for inviting persons with disabilities. That means we are representing ourselves. Because many times people represent us on our behalf. So we are very happy to be here on our own to represent ourselves. And the book is quite exciting. I haven't read through the book yet. I just got it when I got here. However, I'm going to read when I get back home. However, after what I've listened, I have a few questions. And for example, our Namibian government, many times our president is always saying that we want people, all that are, whether it's rich, whether poor, to feel that they are on the same level. However, what I see is totally different. People that are the have and the have not are divided. And the issue of land, everybody's complaining about land. It's really an emotive topic. And I've never been involved in a discussion that deals with land. This is probably the first time that I'm talking about or involved in an issue that has to do with land. And truly, a lot of people are actually very angry or emotive about land.
point is, for example, if we have farms, or I have a farm, or I'm given a farm, for instance, and I don't have any single cent. So now I have a farm, and maybe I go to Agribank for a loan. They won't even be able, they refuse to give me a loan. For example, Mr. Dempers, you said there was a point when you wanted to actually expose the list of those that have been resettled. However, you were not granted the opportunity to expose the list. What was wrong? What was the motive that they were not so keen to show the list of those that have been resettled? Perhaps the elite are the ones that have benefited from the resettlement programs. So now if we have limited funds, how are we able to also buy land? I am very poor. I'm really, really poor. I won't even hide it or try to put the right money. I am really poor. However, I want to farm. So now as persons with disabilities, we are always at the back. If we have to get any help, we are the last to get any help. We are hardly included, we are hardly mainstreamed, we are hardly getting any opportunities. We are not looking at the same level as other persons in our country. For example, if I have to give one instance where other countries actually prioritize persons with disabilities. For example, if it comes to farming, maybe when they are given or when they are giving land, then they give, maybe they think, they will say maybe in the list, if there is a list of 50 people that are getting land, there will perhaps be 2 or 3 people that are having disabilities that will be included in the list. But in Namibia, I don't think they think of us at all. Nothing of, we don't get any benefits, we don't get any assistance, and I think that way is wrong. I would like to thank our chairperson of the Federation of Persons with Disability, who said, well, the book has got a whole lot of interviewees, but not persons with disabilities. So my advice is, perhaps in future, to think of us when you have got committees or on issues of land, that perhaps we can represent ourselves. Please do think of us. We want to be part and parcel of the project, of any project. We don't want others doing it on our behalf. Because many times when they are representing us, the benefit goes to them and not to us. Thank you very much.
Be an inclusive society. As to page 30, I find your question very difficult to answer. First of all, I think as an anthropologist who does academic work, it's maybe a bit different than me. I said in the beginning, this is the work of a journalist, not of a scientist or an academic. So I write stories mainly, including factual information and how to name people, how to talk about black and white people in the different groups within these was for me a problem. So I just quickly want to read that one paragraph so that everybody knows what we are talking about. I write on page 30, whether we want to call it by its name or not, land reform is a black and white issue. A certain amount of white-owned land is supposed to change into black hands. The beneficiaries of land reform are black, while the people who are targeted as willing sellers of this land or for its expropriation are white. I am aware that at this point in time it is neither politically correct nor humanly desirable to emphasize the color of people's skin. However, officially used terms, at least at that time it was always used, such as formerly disadvantaged or historically disadvantaged in the context of land reform, are neither more precise nor more correct, but merely create mental detours in people's mind, always ending up in the simple translation into black and white. So I cannot really answer your questions how I can do it differently, but maybe if you can give me an advice how it can be, how we can talk about this land issue not using words like black and white, I would be glad to talk with you about that.
On the question of stakeholder exclusion.
Disabilities to interviews because there are so few that have benefited from land reform or even in particular the resettlement program. I am speaking under correction, but I think some of the earlier drafts of the resettlement policy had also people with disability as some kind of criteria for people to be prioritized. But as many policies in our government, what is on paper is always not what is happening in reality. So sometimes we just need to make sure that we confront our political leaders and the technocrats and make sure that these policies are enforced. The sale of communal land is real. I really take off my hat for the people in the two Kabango regions. They've been in the news the past few months on a weekly basis, sort of confronting their traditional leaders about some of the deals around land reform. And the traditional leaders have also exposed some of the malpractices from the side of the ministry, and luckily some of these cases are being investigated. I agree that women are often being mentioned to be included, but they are not always included. Another group of marginalized communities is the San. They are supposed to be our first citizens in this country, but we have dismally failed to empower them. Even where they were given land, resettled, other black, powerful black communities have taken their land and they remain on the margins of our society. In terms of the list of the resettlement, the high-level committee, after that tense meeting of 2 hours debating whether the list must be released or not, released the list, and actually this created more questions than answers. And at the floor of the second land conference, many people still complained about the incomplete nature of the list. And consequently, the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into Ancestral Lands recommended that an independent audit be commissioned to audit the entire resettlement program. And we are hoping that there will be no delay, that in the next financial year, this audit will kick off so that we can have a clear picture of what has been the successes and challenges, weaknesses of the resettlement program. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Nakuta. Mine is not so much of a question, but I would like to comment. And I'll start with the use of the word black and white. Unlike my colleague, I totally like the idea that you are using the word black and white. And let me explain. In Namibia, we've got, with independence, obviously given our history, we have used the word previously disadvantaged. Some people are saying it's the right word. I personally think maybe it was the right word then, but it cannot be, and it is not the right word. Why do I say so? I'm saying so because under the rubric of previously disadvantaged, we have seen, and you mentioned about there's a few elite blacks. When we talk about resettlement funds, in terms of the resettlement policy, it says that the people, one of the beneficiaries, and correct me, would be or is currently one of the beneficiaries are previously disadvantaged people. But guess who is standing in the queue of resettlement? Ministers, governors, permanent secretaries. In fact, a few years back, we had the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Land being resettled. I remember I asked one of the board members, why would you do this? And the person was telling me, but why not? If we don't do it, then we are discriminating. And I said, that is almost a deliberate misunderstanding of discrimination. Because human rights law says, international human rights law says, you may not discriminate, but there are instances where you are compelled to discriminate. In other words, to address a wrong of the past. Then we talk about you must indirectly discriminate. So that's why I like the idea. In fact, Namibia has been called upon to desegregate people that has been, who amongst these blacks has been resettled, for example. And only if we desegregate and not use this general term, previously disadvantaged, would we see that it's actually not the black people that has benefited from resettlement or land reform, but it's a few elitist blacks and whatever. So for me, the term of the use of the term black and white is actually where we need to go. That's why we've got the problem in South Africa and in Namibia, because we are using these general terms, and it is used, as I said, as a disguise to hijack development programs that are supposed to mean for other people. Lastly, my brother Uhuru, it's also just a comment, it's not a question. I heard you say that there is not political will in the country. And I totally agree with you. I know you served on the resettlement, not the commission. It's almost 2 years now. Nothing has happened. So it is very clear that there is no political will. And I want to disagree with you to say that the property clause in the country, in our constitution, is problematic. It is not problematic. If you go to the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's having the same phraseology of property clause. If you go to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, on Human and People's Rights, same protection of property. The problem is that we are narrowly interpreting the property clause. And the African Commission have said property as guaranteed in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights should not be given this narrow understanding that the Western world is having. The property clause must be interpreted in terms of the African Commission so as to include, for example, ancestral land, communal property, and not this notion of private property. So that is just for me. So we don't have a constitutional problem. It is right. What we need is a broader and much more innovative interpretation of the property clause in our constitution. Thank you very much. Sorry.
That's why we have all the program we have, whether it's affirmative action, resettlement, is benefiting the political connected. Because the approach we are using is a political approach. I think it's about time we use, when we come to address the issue of land, we use the economical approach. The difference between the two approaches is this. When you are using a political approach, you're concerned about land distribution or resources distributions. But when you are using economical, you look about availability. So if you look at the two terms, the first term of distribution is it triggers the emotion of greed, the emotion of scarcity, But when you look about the other part of availability, it speaks to the African terminology of Ubuntu, of sharing, and all those things. That's what is lacking in these things. And to the people out here, I think we didn't lost a political party in our war. We lost land. And land means economical to us. It means our identity, our culture that we lost, our spirituality that we lost. It's not a political party that we lost. And that's why we are addressing this one and I didn't go for the genocide issues. So it's a thing about time, and my brother want to comment on what we said in our previous debate. We said when we come to speak about the land, we normally in Namibia we speak about the Afrikaners are hiding behind the Germans' white communities. We are not approaching them head on, but we look at the distribution of land. They also get the land from the Germans. So it's about time we bring everyone on the table. We bring the farm workers. When you look at the settlement program, it's actually now discriminating the farm workers. So when we head going forward, we had to bring these people on the table, and also our brothers who are advocating for the disability communities. That's my contribution tonight. Thank you.
My name is Alfred. I'm just an old man from Greenwald, and I learned through a friend of mine, Professor Peter, that it's a event like this taking place here. I said, let me just open an event for this indicated force to this group or something. Just want to hear. Don't expect much from me. I came to learn more than anything else. So, let's do that. Should I smile so that you can see my teeth? Okay. And as someone who's got no idea what's going on in this area, the first thing that I want to do is just to get an understanding of the concept that is being used here, land reform. What actually is land reform? Thirdly, before I say anything else, I would like to understand that when you use concept, actually the concept might be conveying the same message to everyone. Actually, me, I don't know whether other people, I cannot understand what you mean. And then the next thing is what I see a slight problem is the generic approach to the issue. I see a lot of way to between the concept of land to be used for production and land just to pitch up the color. Perhaps some of the document does things out clearly, but from what has been said here, I don't see a line delineating the two. If I just need a piece of land to pitch on my shack, that shouldn't be treated the same as someone who's looking for land to carry out productive activities. Probably there is somewhere there, but I actually couldn't grasp the delineation line between the two. It must actually be there. The next thing is it's a remark to my sister Erica. I would like to, I'm not in academics, I said I'm just an old man. I would like to express a layman's opinion that I do differ with you with regards to the way you use some of the concepts. He said to the white Namibians, land means hard work, right? While to the black ones, it means livelihood. Those concepts are not the opposite of each other. They cannot be compared to each other. If you put emphasis on the statement that the blacks are looking for land for just for livelihood, it can have a negative connotation because they just need to be given land, lie on their backs, and wait for manna to fall from heaven. I don't think that's what the blacks are thinking.
Thank you very much.